I have been paying her phone bill for 2 years. Same plan, same number, same amount every month, like clockwork. We split most things, but the phone was on my account and neither of us had ever thought twice about it. So, when the bill came in and the data usage on her line had doubled, I noticed. I sat with it for a minute, told myself there was probably an explanation. Maybe she had been streaming more. Maybe something changed with her apps. I did not say anything to her. I just paid it and kept the statement. The following month, it tripled, not doubled again. The third month was triple the baseline. I pulled up the last 4 months side by side on my laptop and looked at the numbers. The first month was normal. The second month was elevated. The third month was double. The fourth month was nearly 4 times what it had been 6 months earlier. That is not a streaming habit. That is a second life running on her phone. The spikes were not random. They followed a pattern. Specific weekends, specific evenings, specific nights. She had told me she was exhausted and going to sleep early. I am not a man who jumps to conclusions. I am also not a man who ignores patterns. I gave it another full week before I moved. I wanted to be certain I was not building a story out of something that had a perfectly reasonable explanation. So I gave it one more billing cycle. The third month came in at nearly 4 times the baseline. There was no reasonable explanation. I kept paying the bill. I kept saying nothing. I started cross-referencing the usage timestamps against my own memory. The heaviest data periods lined up with every story that had not quite added up over the last several months. The girls' night that ran until 2 in the morning. That evening she came home distracted and barely said 10 words to me. The weekend she visited a friend 2 hours away, and her texts back to me were short and delayed in a way they never used to be. I went back further. I pulled bills going back 6 months and mapped every spike against a calendar I kept on my phone. Not for this purpose, just a habit I have always had of logging what I do each day. 31 data spikes in 6 months. 28 of them fell on evenings or weekends where her story placed her somewhere she should not have needed her phone that heavily. 3 of them fell on nights she was home with me, which told me something I had not considered yet. She had not always been somewhere else. Sometimes she had been right there in the same apartment, and I had been sitting across from her while her data ran in the background. I thought about those 3 specific nights. I remembered one of them clearly. We had watched a film together, and she had been on her phone more than usual, and I had made a comment about it, and she had laughed and put it face down, not face up where I could glance at the screen, face down. I had laughed back at the time and made a joke about it and let it go. I thought about that moment for a long time. She had been in the same room as me, laughing with me, and running data on a conversation I was not part of. I did not let it go now. I added it to the folder. Every spike had a story attached to it. None of the stories held up against the numbers. During those 6 weeks, I also started paying attention to her behavior in a way I had not allowed myself to before. Not paranoid at watching or jumping to conclusions, just clear-eyed observation. She had changed in small ways that individually meant nothing but together formed a picture. She started taking her phone into the bathroom when she showered. She used to leave it on the nightstand. She started going to bed earlier than she used to, or at least claiming she was heading to bed earlier. She stopped volunteering information about her day the way she always had, not dramatically, just less detailed than before. When I asked questions, she answered them, but she did not offer anything beyond the answer. I thought about the last several months and how many of those moments I had noticed and dismissed. The night she got home 2 hours later than expected and explained it away in one sentence. The weekend, she said she needed space and went to stay with a friend. And when I asked which friend, she gave me a name I had never heard before. The way she laughed at her phone sometimes late at night in a way that felt disconnected from anything I was part of. All of it had been sitting there. I had seen it and chosen to believe the easier explanation every single time. The phone bill took that choice away from me. I cataloged all of it, stored it, and said absolutely nothing. Most people do not know that the detailed billing statement your carrier sends every month breaks down data usage by day, not just the monthly total, but individual session timestamps showing when data was active on each line. I requested the itemized version going back 6 months. It took 3 days to arrive in my email. What it showed me was a session log for her line, date, time, duration of each data session, right down to the minute. I mapped every session against the calendar on my phone. The sessions that ran late on evenings, she claimed to be tired. The sessions that ran for hours on nights, she claimed to be worn out. The sessions that overlapped with times she had been sitting right across from me. Then came the night I got my confirmation. She told me she was turning in early. She kissed me goodnight and went to the bedroom. About 20 minutes later, I got up to get water. I passed the bedroom door. It was not closed all the way. I heard her voice, low, deliberate, the tone people use when they do not want to be overheard. I caught a name. I caught one sentence. I did not need to hear anything else, not one more word. I went back to the living room and sat in the dark for a long time. By the time I finally went to sleep, I had everything I needed, and I already knew how the next 2 weeks were going to go. By the end of that night, I had a complete record, billing history, session logs, a timeline that no explanation was going to survive. I screenshotted everything. I saved every document to a folder she would never find, organized by date, labeled clearly, the kind of documentation a person only builds when they already know the answer and just need the record to be clean. Then I went to bed. I slept better than I had in weeks, not because I was happy about what I had found, but because the uncertainty was gone. The worst part of those 4 months was not knowing for certain. Now I knew, and knowing, even the worst version of knowing, is easier to carry than suspicion. The next morning, I made coffee the same way I always do. She came out of the bedroom and asked me how I slept. I told her fine. She sat across from me and told me about something she had seen on her phone the night before. Some video she thought was funny. She turned her phone toward me and I watched it and I smiled. She had no idea what I had been building on the laptop, sitting 3 feet from where she stood. None of what I had built was visible to her. Over the next 2 weeks, I started moving quietly. I separated our joint streaming accounts. I removed her from the car insurance policy. She had her own income. She could cover it herself. I contacted the phone carrier and set up the account, so her line would automatically roll off at the end of the billing cycle, paying for the device she used to run 4 hours of data. While I sat alone was not something I intended to keep doing. I started moving personal money I had been setting aside into a separate account she had no access to. We were not married. There was no legal process to navigate, just 2 people who had shared a life for 2 years, and one of them who had been quietly living a second one alongside it. I went through the apartment in my head during those 2 weeks and made a list of what was mine and what was hers. Most of the furniture was mine. I had moved into this place before she did. Her things filled maybe a third of the space. I thought about the version of my life that existed before she was in it, and I realized I could remember it clearly. It had not been so long ago that I had forgotten entirely who I was without her. I also thought about the future I had been building toward with her, the conversations we had about where we were headed, the places we had talked about living, the things we had said we wanted. All of that was already gone, not because of the conversation that was coming, because of what she had been doing for 4 months while those conversations were happening. The conversation was just going to make it official, nothing dramatic, nothing that would raise a question, just a man getting his affairs in order before a conversation he had already decided was coming. She noticed something was different about me during those 2 weeks. Her instincts were telling her something had shifted, even though nothing on the surface had changed. She asked me twice if everything was okay. The second time she asked, she held my face in her hands and looked at me like she was searching for something. I told her I was just tired from work. She accepted that. She should not have. I had the conversation on an evening I had chosen deliberately. Neither of us had anywhere to be the following morning. No reason for either of us to rush anywhere. I wanted her to have nowhere to be. When it was over, she was sitting on the couch reading something on her phone. When I came in and sat across from her, she looked up and smiled at me. I did not smile back. Something in my face told her immediately that this was different. She put the phone down. I told her I knew. She asked me what I was talking about. I told her about the phone bill. I laid out the data spikes and what each one aligned with. I walked her through the calendar I had built, date by date, spike by spike, story by story. I described the night I passed that bedroom door, what I heard, the name I caught. Then I brought up the question I had asked her 2 weeks earlier. I had asked her one evening where she had been on a specific night 3 months back, and I told her not to lie to me. She gave me a story without hesitating. The session log for that night showed her data running continuously for 4 hours. The location in her story had no reason to generate 4 straight hours of data usage. She had lied to my face without blinking, even though I asked her not to. 4 months of documentation and a timeline she was not going to argue against. That was what was sitting in the folder. I think the specificity of what I laid out made her somewhat denial impossible. This was not suspicion. This was not emotion. This was a documented record with dates and timestamps and a real-time log. She started to cry. She started to explain the how, the why, the version of the story that was supposed to make it make sense. I let her finish without interrupting. I did not raise my voice. When she was done, I told her we were done. She wanted more time to talk. The talking was finished. She asked me how long I had known. I told her 4 months. She stared at me. She asked me why I had not said anything. I told her giving her the chance to manage my reaction was never part of the plan. I was going to know everything before she knew I knew anything. She wanted to know how long I had been watching. 4 months of billing session logs, I told her. And one night I walked past that bedroom door. She put her hands over her face. I waited. When she looked up, she asked me if there was anything she could say. The answer was no. She asked me if I had loved her. I told her that was exactly why I had handled it the way I did, instead of the way I wanted to. She understood what that meant. Then she asked me who else knew. Nobody, I told her. This was between us. Making a scene was not something I had any interest in. She needed to know if it was truly final. It was. She asked me one more time before she stood up, whether there was any version of this where we could find our way back. I told her no, not because I had not loved her, but because the person I had loved had been lying to me for 4 months, and I was not interested in spending the next 4 months wondering if it was happening again. Some things cannot be rebuilt, not because the damage is too great, but because the person doing the building would never fully trust the foundation again. I knew that about myself. So my answer was no. She left that evening with a bag. I watched her walk out, and I did not feel what I expected to feel. Not relief exactly, just the quiet that comes after you have been carrying something heavy for 4 months and finally put it down. She came back the following week for the rest of her things while I was at work. I came home to a space that was 2/3 full, and I stood in the doorway for a moment, taking stock of what was left. She had taken everything that was clearly hers and left everything that was clearly mine. There was no dispute about any of it, no confusion, no missing items, no text asking where something was. Everything about it was clean. I walked in, made something to eat, and sat at the table by myself for the first time in 2 years. The quiet took some getting used to. Then it did not. Everything that remained was mine. She sent me one message 3 days after that. It said she was sorry and that she hoped I would eventually be able to forgive her. She said she had made the worst mistake of her life. She said she missed me. I read it once. Then I archived it without responding. I did not block her. I did not respond. I just moved on. Someone we both knew reached out about a month later and told me she had ended things with the person she had been seeing, that she kept asking about me, that she wanted to know if there was any chance. I listened to everything our friend said. Then I told them I appreciated them reaching out and that I genuinely hoped she was okay. And that was the end of that conversation. I changed my running route around that time, not because of her, just because I had been running the same loop for 2 years, and it was time for something different. New streets, new direction, new pace. You stop needing the old route when you realize the destination already changed without you noticing. It turns out that is a useful approach in more ways than one. People ask me sometimes how I stayed so calm through all of it, how I sat across from her every day for 4 months, knowing what I knew and never let it show. I tell them the same thing every time. I did not stay calm because I did not care. I stayed calm because I had spent 4 months building something, and I was not going to let emotion tear it down in a single moment. I cared enough to handle it correctly. She thought she was managing me the whole time. She thought the occasional question and the reassuring answer was enough to keep me in the dark. She was not managing me. She was just watching me finish building something she would not see until it was already done, and there was nothing left to say. There is nothing to forgive when someone shows you exactly who they are. The phone bill did not lie to me. 4 months of documented deception proven by a phone bill. I just made sure I had all of it before I walked away, and then I did walk.